Backstage, I'm given bottled water, a bowl of fruit, a pee break. I'm told it's a full house, asked if I would answer questions from the audience following my reading. People would love to know what it's like to have a first book do what mine has done. I agree. I perfectly understand. I'd love to know the same thing. Then I'm being guided down the hall into the darkened wings. Whispered voices tell me to watch my step. An opening appears in a velvet curtain and I step through, alone.
I'm here at the Rosewater Supper Club in Toronto talking to novelist Andrew Pyper about his book, The Killing Circle. Welcome, Andrew. And I think the first thing I wanted to ask you is if you could just sort of describe The Killing Circle for us a bit.
Sure. The Killing Circle is the story of Patrick Rush. He's a pushing 40-year-old journalist in present-day Toronto. And he's someone who's had a bit of a tough patch of late. He's lost his wife a few years earlier to cancer. He's a single father of a young boy. And he's further plagued by a terrible desire to be a writer. But he feels he doesn't have a story in him. So he joins a writing circle, an amateur writing circle, where people exchange stories. And he still doesn't have a story to tell, but Angela does, a young woman in the group who reads from her what may or may not be personal journal, a story that may or may not be true about a young girl who may or may not be her, who in her childhood moved from foster home to foster home, all the while being pursued by this dark figure she calls the Sandman. And later, Patrick ends up stealing this story, claiming it as his own, publishes it, and that's when the really bad things start to happen.
Do you think there is a lot of jealousy between writers in Canada, especially aspiring writers?
I think it's true of any workplace, frankly. I mean, I think if you pried open any office, any workplace, I think you'd have a lot of private misgivings or feelings of slights or whatever these kind of these aggressions exist anywhere. But I think in the literary community, they can be more pointed because writing is such a uniquely intimate practice. It's so personal. It comes from a place that is so essentially who you are that not getting what you want in that particular arena feels more personal than even sort of being passed over for the promotion at the at the standard office.
There's a part in The Killing Circle where you kind of spoof literary awards. There's a thing called the Dickie.
Yeah.
I'm wondering what are you taking aim at there?
Oh, I don't know. What do you think, Adam? No, I was having some fun. I mean, the book was certainly fun to write, I was having some. It's a comic set piece about a literary awards gala. I was having fun with the notion of prizes generally and how they've become such a huge part of the cultural apparatus for books in Canada now, and not just an honor, but a marketing tool and a way that readers are kind of told where to go. And I think it's a great thing in general. Anything that gets more attention for books is good. But I think they can be, constraining in the kinds of books that they tend to acknowledge.
Well, and yes, in the book, the Dickie goes to a book that celebrates the domestic heritage of Canadian family life.
Yes.
Why don't you personally write that kind of pretty domestic, can-lit novel?
That's a good question. I've just never been inclined to write such a book, or I've always, it takes me 3 years to write a novel, from conception to delivery, and it's a long time, and that's a long commitment. I've had, really important ex-girlfriends that didn't last half that long. So for me, it has to be, I need to be really engaged by the story. And for me, a plot-driven story, a story with different things happening, surprises, twists and turns, those thriller aspects keep me interested. So far, I just haven't felt that interested in a kind of, looking back on my grandmother's life kind of novel.
You grew up in Stratford, Ontario, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And for you, it becomes this kind of, ex-urban Ontario in your books is this kind of dark, gothic place, isn't it?
Yeah, if the Killing Circle is set in present-day downtown Toronto, and but it's and it really is Toronto. I mean, there's definite landmarks you'll recognize, but at the same time, it's seen through a kind of a dark prism. It's a slightly nightmarish version of Toronto. And similarly, when I write about small towns in Lost Girls or other short stories or novels, they are those real places as I remember them, but given a certain Halloween twist.
Not Alice Munro's Ontario.
No, it's the haunted house version of Alice Munro's Ontario.
What I was wondering, reading the book, is, does this guy walk around having these disturbing thoughts all the time? I mean, do you think your inner life is darker than the norm?
I think my imaginative life is darker than the norm. I think I'm probably more drawn to these topics and where they can go than most responsible citizens. Sort of when I read the newspaper, for example, and there's those gruesome stories, I'm the person who passes it over. I can't read that stuff. The real stuff, I respond very with aversion to, but the imagination is allowed to do. I think it gets to do all that work for me.